Welcome back to Speaking with Confidence, the podcast that helps you build the soft skills that lead to real results. Communication, storytelling, public speaking, and showing up with confidence in every conversation that counts. I'm Tim Newman, a recovering college professor turned communication coach, and I'm thrilled to guide you on a journey to becoming a powerful communicator. In the most recent episode of the Speaking with Confidence podcast, my guest Cam Awesome told lots of stories to get his points across. If you were to watch him speak in person or online, he is the same way. He connects with people because of his story. In this episode, I'm going to talk about the power of storytelling. What if I told you the most confident speakers aren't the ones who know the most? They're the ones who tell the best stories. Storytelling is what separates a forgettable talk from one that truly sticks. In fact, research shows people are 22 times more likely to remember a fact if it's wrapped in a story. And here's the best part. You already have everything that you need. Your wins, your losses, the moment you laughed or learned the hard way. That's all the good stuff. You don't need more credentials or bigger words. You just need to shape your story so it connects. When your story lands, your message lands, and that's what makes you unforgettable. But why do stories have this kind of power? Let's look at what's actually happening in your audience's brain. Imagine giving a presentation packed with data, only to have your audience forget almost all of it, except for the story you told. It's not a coincidence. When you share facts, your audience processes them in a limited part of the brain. But when you share a story, something different happens. Stories light up more brain regions than facts alone. Sensory, emotional, and even motor areas all get involved. This whole brain activation helps the message stick. Scientists call this neurocoupling. When you describe a real moment, maybe you froze during a big talk or your hands were shaking. Listeners don't just understand, their brains mirror their experience. Say, my palms were sweating, and some people's palms might actually start to sweat. That's because stories trigger mirror neurons, making your audience feel what you felt. And research backs this up. TED's top talks show a 22 times retention boost over facts alone. According to cognitive psychologist Jerome Bruner, it isn't that statistics don't matter, they do. But stories give your facts a heartbeat. When you share a mistake, a challenge, or a turning point, you activate the brain's empathy center, making your message feel human and memorable. Let's make this real. Picture two financial advisors explaining retirement planning. One shows a compound interest chart. The other tells a story about helping a client who lost their job, describing late-night calls, stacks of bills, and the plan they built together at the kitchen table. In a Wharton study, storytellers raised 300% more funds than data-only fundraisers. Now, vulnerability builds trust, and trust makes your message stick. So when you prepare your next talk, don't just ask, what do I want to say? Instead ask, what have I lived through that they need to hear? And when your story includes real moments, listeners' brains sync with yours. That's neurocoupling, and it's the reason your message truly lands. A story's power isn't just about emotion or memory, it's about structure. So let's see how a simple blueprint can turn even the most forgettable talk into something people actually remember. There's a core structure behind every story that sticks: the struggle, strategy, and transformation. I learned this firsthand when I was giving a presentation overloaded with information. And honestly, this is a problem with academic research presentations in general. The slides were dense, and I could feel the energy slipping away. People were present, but not truly engaged. So I made a split-second decision to drop the script and share a real story about a time things went sideways for me and what I learned from it. And instantly, the room changed. People leaned in. They saw themselves in the story. And most speakers skip the struggle and jump right into the polished success. But research confirms that stories with clear conflict and resolution are far more memorable. When I talk about messing up a talk, losing momentum, or bombing a Q&A, the response is always stronger than I just list off the wins. Audience connects with the challenge because it feels real. When I walk through the strategy I use to recover, like how I rehearse differently now, or how I open with connection instead of content, people actually listen. Then I close with the transformation, the result, the growth, the impact. And studies show that using this three-part framework significantly improves recall and engagement. And this isn't just for storytelling keynotes. If you're explaining a product, you could say it saves 40% in processing time. Or you could tell the story of someone drowning in manual work, the struggle, who finds the right tool, as a strategy, and finally gets their weekends back, as a transformation. That's the version that people remember. Framing your audience as a hero taps into motivation research on heroes' journeys. In this blueprint, the audience faces the challenge. You're the guide who helps them find the solution. The villain might be an inefficient process, a looming deadline, or even self-doubt. When you walk them through the journey, struggle, strategy, and transformation, you activate their problem-solving brain and make your message stick. And here's a key. Don't rush the struggle. Stay in it long enough for your audience to feel it. When the struggle is real, the transformation feels earned. The next time you prepare a talk, start with a real challenge. Then show that change and what came next. Taking the step from your own life to the stage or in the front of the room leading a meeting starts with recognizing that your most meaningful stories often come from moments you didn't plan to share. One of the stories that drew the biggest response in my experience wasn't about a major achievement. It was about a time I felt unsure and frustrated, figuring things out as I went along. The moment I shared it, people leaned in. That's when I realized it's not the polished success stories that connect. It's the honest, everyday moments. The mistakes, the pivots, and the lessons you take from them are what resonate. Research backs this up. Studies show that when you share an authentic setback, your credibility rises by 43%. Audiences don't just want to hear about your wins, they want to know what you struggle with and how you move forward. For example, a financial advisor sharing the late nights spent reworking a client's plan, or an engineer describing the frustration of a stubborn bug, can be more memorable than a list of accomplishments. These details invite listeners into a real moment, making your message stick. If you want to find your best story, try a 60-second sprint. Spend 30 seconds describing a challenge, then 30 seconds on how you overcame it. That first unfiltered version usually holds your most compelling material. Don't worry about making it perfect. Focus on being specific. Mention the late night emails, the doubts, or the frustration. These details are what people remember. And people connect more with your tension than your triumph. When you talk about the nerves before a big meeting or the uncertainty after a tough conversation, your audience sees themselves in your story. And when you explain what you tried or how you adjusted, you give them something to apply in their own lives. So how do you know if a story is worth sharing? If it still tightens your stomach, it's emotional gold. That's the story that your audience needs. Leading into that discomfort is what makes your message real and memorable. The real impact of your talk doesn't come from perfect slides or polished data. It comes from the connection you create. Authentic stories are what make your message last. When you speak, it's not just about the information you share. It's about the impact you leave behind. Stories create that emotional connection that facts alone can't achieve. And data shows listeners recall only 10% of facts 3 days later anyway. But stories improve that to around 65%. And that's a difference that you can use. This week, pick one client story and map it to struggle, strategy, and transformation. Share it in your next meeting and notice how engagement shifts. The best speakers move people to action by creating experiences, not just delivering information. So don't just inform, connect. Share one story today and watch your message stick. Remember, we're looking for progress, not perfection. That's all for today. Be sure to visit speakingwithconfidencepodcast.com to get your free book, The Top 21 Challenges for Public Speakers and How to Overcome Them. You can also register for the Formula for Public Speaking course. Always remember, your voice has the power to change the world. We'll talk to you next time. Take care.